if we could open up with the Open Public Meetings Act, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Pinelands Commission was given in compliance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act by providing notice to all municipal and county clerks within the Pinelands area and to the Secretary of State on December 20th, 2017, and to the Commission's officially designated newspapers on December 20th, 2017, and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the Commission's office.
Thank you. Ms. Executive Director, good morning. We have roll call.
Good morning. Commissioner Ashman?
I'm here.
Commissioner Avery?
Here.
Commissioner Barr?
Here.
Commissioner Chila?
Here.
Commissioner Galetta?
Here.
Commissioner Howell?
Here.
Commissioner Janarone?
Here.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Here.
Commissioner Lobauer?
Here.
Commissioner Pikaleski?
Here.
Commissioner Prickett?
Here.
Commissioner Quinn? Commissioner Rowan Green? Chairman Erlin?
I'm here. All right, if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, getting started with our agenda. This will be our annual reorganization meeting. So the first item on our agenda is the nomination and election of a vice chairman. And before I have any nominations, I'd like to turn it over to current vice chair, Galetta, who's on the phone. He wanted to.
Staff and public. This year, I would like to step down as vice chair. There's been a couple issues with my health, family, and work that have really put a lot of constraints on me. But I really want to give my appreciation to my fellow commissioners and staff during my stay. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And also, I do have to check out at 10:30, so if you're busy in an agenda item, I might just sign off. But if you would allow me, Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate who I think would be an excellent vice chair, probably the most experienced person on the board next to Candy, and that would be Avery. And that would be my choice for vice chair, and I'd like to nominate. I'd like to second that.
Okay, well, Paul, sad to see you go as my right-hand man here. You've done a fantastic job, and I appreciate all that you've done, and I know the other commissioners share my sentiments. So it sounds like we have a nomination and a second for vice chair. Do we have any other nominations from any commissioners?
Close nominations for vice chair.
All right, all in favor of closing nominations? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I don't think there's any opposed or abstentions there, right?
That's a good question.
I'm not moving.
All right. So before we do cast a vote, Alan, is there anything that you'd like to say?
Well, I also would like to thank Chairman or Commissioner Galetta for his service as vice chair. He's done an admirable job. Wish him well as he deals with the issues that he's talked about this morning. I'm willing to take on the job. I've done it before, and would appreciate it and appreciate everybody's confidence. I mean, that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations, Mr. Avery.
Thank you very much.
Vice Chairman Avery. All
Vice
right.
Chairman Avery, you know that there's no salary associated with this position.
It's the same salary.
Yeah.
If there was a salary, I wouldn't be here.
I'll give you half of my salary. All right. So next up on our reorganization are committee assignments. And I had sent a message out to all commissioners asking if anyone had any changes from the current alignment. And I did not get any request for changes. So unless somebody has a request here today, I'm going to keep the current P&I and P&B assignments the same. Any additions or comments from commissioners? Okay, we'll move on to our first formal agenda item, which is the adoption of the July 13, 2018 minutes. We have a motion, we have a second. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And we have one abstention. All right, next up, we have our committee and staff reports. I do not believe we had a personnel and budget meeting, but we did have a policy and implementation committee meeting, of which I'll read the summary. The committee adopted, the meeting was on July 27th. The committee adopted the minutes of the May 18th meeting. We also recommended certification of the Egg Harbor Township Ordinance 1218 and 1918. The committee received a presentation on the Pineland Infrastructure Trust Fund. Staff will be seeking input from the counties and municipalities with sufficient remaining development potential in the regional growth areas as to their needs, and will consider expanding funding of projects beyond wastewater, refining the ranking criteria, and developing a funding formula. And then the committee also received an update on the 2004 MOA with South Jersey Transportation Authority in preparation for a presentation by the Transportation Authority next month regarding the relocation of critical bird habitat at the Atlantic City Airport away from the runway and pursuing more development projects. So that's the summary from the P&I meeting of July 27th. Any questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to the executive staff reports.
Thank you. We met with and began contract negotiations, met with CWA. So that has started. I don't believe a second meeting has been scheduled yet. Okay, so that's underway. We're already 2 years into the contract, so good to move quickly. Speaking of South Jersey Transportation Authority, the site visit that we've been trying to get together for months is now scheduled for August 15th. That will be with us, South Jersey Transportation Authority, FAA, Fish and Wildlife, and someone from DEP. And then they will be at the August P&I meeting, which is Susan, 24th. So I guess that's like the following week. So timing is good. And then continuing in what I'm sure to be my soon to end track record of good news, we hired someone else. We have hired Dane Ward. Stand up. There he is. Dane works in the science office, which now has 4,000 people. No, which is now. Whenever someone new comes in, we have this thing where I ask someone to write a blurb, and then I usually don't like it because it's either too serious or not. This one took so many iterations, I can't begin to tell you. First there was a boring one, then there was a funny one. So here we go. I'm going with I've compiled them. Dane Ward joined the science office on July 23rd. I didn't meet him for I don't know how long. I bumped into him by the bog garden because the science office keeps their staff under wraps. You barely see these people. They're either in the field or working. Previously, he was the assistant director of the Laboratory of Pinelands Research and an assistant professor at Drexel, where he studied northern pine snake ecology and earned his PhD in 2015. He does have a personal life. Here's my favorite part about Dane. He's a beekeeper. He also likes to scuba dive. I don't care about that. Enjoys brewing beer of all kinds. That's good. And he's restoring his house that formerly belonged to his grandparents. So that is Dane. We are excited to have him. He seems happy so far. That's good. Welcome.
Welcome, Dane.
But I do just have to read you the other one that I got. Dane is a scientist sometimes. He studied snakes once. Another time he studied butterflies. He has ADD. He has no children and is truly boring. I did not write that. I think Dane wrote it, but Just saying. I'm hoping he wrote it and he's not insulted now. And that is all I have.
Good morning. Just an update. We did start to reach out to the counties and towns for the Pinelands Infrastructure Trust Fund. We're starting our process, but we're starting to get some interest. We sent a letter out and got no interest, so now we're making personal phone calls. So we're having better discussions. We had an interesting discussion with ACUA. They've been trying to get a project underway for 4 or 5 years to tap into a sewer line under a golf course, pull the sewage out, treat it, and then use the treated wastewater on the golf course itself. It's outside the Pinelands, and they aren't having any luck. And I said, look for one inside the Pinelands, and maybe you might qualify for the PITF. So that was interesting. I had a long discussion with the Egg Harbor Township people, because you might know that's our largest regional growth area and have a lot of needs. A lot of their needs are related to roads, road widenings, stormwater associated with those road widenings, and intersection improvements. So they have a lot of needs that way, and intersection improvements are really expensive. I learned that they've been talking about this for 20 or 30 years. They just keep making one after the other. So, and then we will be talking to, for instance, Waterford. You recently passed a redevelopment plan for them, and I think we're going to have some infrastructure needs in terms of water and sewer. So that's the kind of thing we're reaching out for. So the other thing I wanted to mention was the Tabernacle is interested in pursuing a reuse of a former mine pit, a Haas pit on Carranza Road. It's an infill district in the preservation area, and that creates its own challenges, but they're looking into solar, whether they can put solar on that site or not. And we've given them suggestions for some changes to their infill ordinance, and we'll see whether they can bring that off or not. So that's all I had.
Good morning, commissioners, members of the public. Just a couple things to mention. On the 25th of July, Susan Grogan and I met with Woodland Township officials here at the commission office. Woodland Township personnel, staff came to that meeting, including their attorney, their engineer, threatened and endangered species consultant, some of the municipal committeemen, and the township clerk. Woodland Township continues to express a need to develop a property that they own on Route 72. That's located between what's commonly referred to as the 4-mile circle. That's the intersection of Route 70 and 72, and the New Jersey State School. The town owns a little over 100 acres out there. Part of it is zoned infill under the commission's regulations, and the township is exploring different alternatives, be they commercial or residential, on how to develop the parcel. Right now, it's our understanding that they're conducting a threatened.
Chuck, real quick. Define infill.
Certainly. So the management areas run from regional growth area all the way down to preservation area. In the preservation area, the commission's regulations set up that the municipalities can establish villages. Chatsworth happens to be a village that's located in the preservation area. Technically, it's called the preservation area. When the commission was putting together its regulations with the CMP, there were certain discrete areas where there was a minor amount of existing development, but not enough to be a village. And the commission's regulations allowed the municipalities to delineate and designate something called an infill area. It's a zoning district for all intents and purposes. And in these infill zoning districts, certain additional development was allowed to occur, but it was significantly limited. So for example, on an existing lot in the infill, whether it's 3.2 acres or 20 acres, only one home was permitted. Some of the infill zoning districts allow for commercial development on existing lots. This one in Woodland Township along Route 72 happens to allow for both residential and commercial of a limited nature. There's some certain aspects of Woodland's situation that the staff is trying to determine exactly how the regulations apply to that infill zoning district. Woodlands is somewhat unique in that it's very large, running basically from the Route 70-72 circle all the way down to the intersection of 563 That's a large infill area. Part of that was in recognition that woodland, for the most part, was located in the preservation area of Pinelands, and future development was significantly limited. Questions on?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
So,
Good.
Chuck, how many infill districts are there in the Pines?
Mrs. Grogan,
There are very few. I think there's only 3 or 4 municipalities who have designated one. Oh, I'm sorry. So Chemung, Tabernacle, large municipality, have large areas that are in the preservation area. So Chemung, Tabernacle, Woodland, I think that might be it. So there's not many. And for the most part, they're small. They're small areas that are, there's a lot of residential development, and there's the occasional vacant lot in between. That's why they're called infill. You know, the idea was to allow people to fill in. But we do have these, Larry and Chuck both mentioned this morning, the two that are the biggest ones that perhaps are the most challenging to deal with. Tabernacle has an infill commercial zone with a very large property in it, an old mining site. And then Woodland Woodland actually has several infill areas. This is the largest one that runs along the highway. So they're challenging.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Chuck. And thank you, Chairman, because I learned a lot today that I didn't know, and I've been around a long time.
I heard it twice
Haven't heard
today, and I
it.
wanted to get it out there.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Sorry, now you can get back to.
certainly,
I'm sorry.
and I just wanted to note for the commission's information that they have met with all the township officials. Woodland Township continues to be very interested in the development of this parcel, and they're exploring different avenues. And they are, as I previously mentioned, in the process of conducting the threatened and endangered species survey of the parcel. On August the 8th, the staff met with representatives from Mullica Township and a resident in Mullica Township. Some development has occurred out on the, right on the edge of the Mullica River. The township has cited this particular person over this matter, and discussions were ongoing as to how to resolve the matter. A structure has actually been built out close to the river. It's a violation of the wetlands and wetland buffer standards of the commission's regulations in Mullica Township. And the structure was also built without construction permits. That's posing other issues, not just land use issues and wetland issues, but actually structures being built without construction permits. And the staff and the township are continuing to try to resolve that matter. I wanted to note that the heritage mineral application in Manchester Township, the staff is reviewing. That's located in the Pinelands National Reserve, not the Pinelands area. The Pinelands area is that area that's state designated, that the Pinelands Commission directly regulates. The Pinelands National Reserve is that area designated by the federal act. The Department of Environmental Protection has primary regulatory jurisdiction for this particular application. We have a memorandum of agreement with DEP wherein we provide comments to the Department of Environmental Protection based on regarding the consistency of the proposed development with the Commission's regulations. The Department of Environmental Protection in turn uses our comments and is to factor them into their decision-making process. We are preparing our comments on that, and I suspect over the next week or so we will be submitting our comments to the Department of Environmental Protection on that particular application. We're working with another matter in Mullica Township. Mullica Township has a landfill. They would like to locate a solar facility on that landfill. It's unclear to the township at the moment the status of whether the landfill, when it last operated, and whether or not it's been capped in accordance with the Commission's rules. And the last thing I just wanted to note, and somewhat of a humorous note, to add a little humor into it, is we've actually been receiving several inquiries over the last couple of weeks from different individuals about the growing of marijuana in the Pinelands area and whether that's permitted in the Pinelands. And the answer to that question is, well, that's one of the questions, is it's an agricultural activity in the Pinelands, and it's permitted to the extent other agricultural activities are permitted. So to answer the commission in respect to it's not a native pineland species, which means it cannot be grown in wetlands or wetland buffers. That's all I had to report.
Susan, anything from you?
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask Chuck a question about the Heritage Minerals site? Is the settlement that was approved by the commission many years ago still in effect, or is that been voided or gone away?
I will pass that one to Ms. Roth.
Thank you.
Stacy, bring your microphone up. I know we're gonna need it.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
That's an interesting question. In reality, the matter was brought back to court. And currently it is still before the magistrate judge who is trying to broker a resolution. The settlement is still in existence. However, whether or not it is in effect is a question, because although the commission went ahead and did what it needed to do in terms of rezoning, the applicant has submitted a new application which involves greater numbers of units on the development area. We made a motion prior to it, after they brought it back into court, because the DEP refused to extend the settlement any further. It had already been extended at least 10 years, if not more. We made a motion for summary judgment, and the magistrate judge essentially pocketed that and has been continuing discussions. So what happened after that is the revised application was submitted by the applicant. DEP found deficiencies, deficiency letter went out, they submitted additional information. So the long and the short of it is the settlement is still out there. From our perspective, we did what we needed to do, the commission did what it needed to do. The property that was supposed to be deed restricted was never deed restricted. The applicant, I think, views it as the settlement's in play, but they get to get more, which I don't think any of the state actors agree with. So at this point, I think the magistrate judge is waiting for a decision from DEP on the pending CAFRA permits. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I know that there was a requirement of the settlement that the county amend the Ocean County amend its water quality management plan to include the area to be developed as a sewered area, which was done based on the numbers in the settlement. Did the township move forward and make amendments to its ordinance to reflect those numbers as well?
Yeah, yes, many years ago when the settlement was first done, the township actually did adopt an ordinance to essentially codify the settlement agreement. So if you were to look in their code under, I forget what they created a new zone. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it actually says permitted uses and intensities of development are in accordance, and then they refer to the settlement agreement. So they did that. So it only permits, in terms of permitted uses, it permits the number of units that were allowed through the settlement agreement.
So the final question is the township involved at all in these discussions, or are they the odd man out again?
Well, I can answer part of that. So Manchester in the last 6 months or so, maybe longer, decided to ask the commission to review its master plan and zoning ordinances for the Pinelands National Reserve area outside the Pinelands area. So that would include the heritage property. They asked the commission formally to review and certify those documents, which, as you know, is an optional process that a number of towns have taken advantage of. Manchester decided they wanted to do that as well. I don't think their request had anything specifically to do with heritage. They have some other properties that there are conflicts in terms of management area designations and zoning that they wanted to resolve. But as a result of that, they've submitted, ordinances and master plans and zoning for us to look at. It gives the commission an opportunity to review and essentially certify or approve their zoning for the heritage site, which matches the settlement agreement. The township has not proposed or asked about increasing the numbers of units or moving zoning lines around. They're happy to just implement the numbers in the agreement through their zoning, and this gives us the opportunity to formally approve that. So that's the process we're following.
Commissioner Avery, with regard to the litigation process, the town is not part of the litigation process. It is strictly the applicant's attorney. PPA is involved, DEP, and us, both of which we each have our own DAG involved in the matter.
Stacy, you said magistrate judge. Is this in federal court?
Yes, because the original case was filed in federal court. So when DEP refused to extend the settlement, the applicant went back into federal court.
What was the cause of action, if you don't mind the 30-second version of what was the claim?
Actually, they just renewed the claims that were before the court.
I mean, the original one.
The original claims, absolutely.
But what
were they? That actually predates me by, so I
If you don't know, that's
know.
fine. Okay, I didn't realize it was federal court though.
Yep.
Thank you.
Do we have anything? Stacy, did you have anything else? Bruce? Over to Paul.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Since we last met, we held our second annual Pinelands Summer Short Course at Kramer Hall in downtown Hamilton. We had more than 100 attendees, which is more than last year. And all the presentations have been very highly rated, including Commissioner Galetta's tour of the Atlantic Blueberry Farm, which drew rave reviews from our staff as well as the public and members of the commission who attended, including Commissioner Lobauer, and Commissioner Janarone also attended the event and said she had a really nice time. And so we're very pleased with how that turned out. And secondly, we also held our Pinelands orientation for newly elected officials last month. More than 30 officials attended that event. Chuck, Larry, Ernie, Sue, and I all delivered presentations. And we're also happy to have Commissioner Howell in attendance. And so I think that went really well. Meanwhile, as you can tell from the lobby, quite a bit of work has been done on our exhibit project. A lot of work's been done by Walter, who's our one-man band for drill construction, who's doing all the carpentry, has demolished the ceiling in the tech room, cut out the wall, reframed it, hung the grid, and for the drop ceiling, some other work has been done to make way for the exhibits. Joel and I have been speaking with Split Rock Studios, who's our exhibit fabricator, on a daily basis to go over what they're creating, particularly with the center island, which features all of the artifacts and then all the images. We want to make sure there's sufficient resolution. They've sent us proofs. We're working on attempting to figure out whether or not the various interactives will work and how they will work. So they're engineering that. So it's been a very busy time, but it's very exciting to see this. This has been something that's been in the works for a long time. As you know, that was an idea that basically was conceived in our office 10 years ago. And so to see it actually happening is quite exciting. So.
Sure. Estimated completion date?
I would say in October, the fall for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to do an unveiling, hopefully, at our November meeting.
I would hope so.
Okay.
That could be the kiss of death by me conceiving that.
I'm not holding you to it.
Government is always ahead of schedule, as you know.
Yes.
So, very well.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for any of the staff reports or any general question? Go ahead.
I offer this now only because Commissioner Galetta says he's going to have to hop off at 10:30, may not be around for our final round of comments. And I just wanted to supplement what Paul was telling us about the short course and the marvel that was the Blueberry Farm tour. I want to thank Commissioner Galetta, not just for me, but also for my grandson, who had the most marvelous time ever. Begged Commissioner Galetta at one point, could we just stay there all day and keep picking blueberries and eating them because they're such marvelous berries. And also, I want to offer my apologies to Commissioner Galetta in advance because I am going to be sharing my photos with Paul for his use to disseminate on our website or on the public. And some of them may be a tad embarrassing for Commissioner Galetta. I mean, to see a commissioner in a hairnet, I don't know. But anyway, thank you, Commissioner Galetta. It was really terrific. I highly recommend that tour to everyone in the public.
Yes. I couldn't hear everything you said, but I did hear thanks a couple times. But I really enjoyed the tour, and I'm glad you came down. It was quite a break for me. I always enjoy this tours.
Great.
And thanks for coming.
All right. All right. Were there any other questions regarding staff reports or comments? No? All right. Moving on. Next, we have our four public resolutions. The first is the Bass River Forest Fire Tower application. And before we get on that, I believe Commissioner Lobauer wanted to ask a question or a
Actually,
statement.
before Commissioner Lobauer, I know that your DA
There's-
wanted to say
Okay,
something.
we'll let Bruce go
Something I need
first.
to address. About 10 days ago, there was a memo. About 10 days ago, there was a memo circulated by 3 commissioners to the rest of the commissioners by email, and that presents potential Open Public Meetings Act problems. And so as we did last month, I would ask that this memo now be put into the minutes of this meeting so the public will know what exactly was circulated among the commissioners, but with the proviso that there are certain parts of this memo dated July 26, 2018, that refer to materials outside the record. And because there was reference to materials outside the record, that's why it was not included when the agenda was sent out. We didn't want to create an impression that there were certain items that are part of the record.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with regard to that application, I would like to make a motion that we table that application today for the purpose of directing the staff to meet with the applicant and to pursue the examination of alternative methods that might be used to try to resolve the applicant's desire to restore visibility from that point, the Bass River Fire Tower area, and yet also do so in a manner that would better balance our obligations here on the Pinelands Commission to preserve, protect, and enhance the preserved forest area and the endangered habitat, the habitat of the endangered plant and animal species that live there. So I'd make that motion. I'd be happy to explain why if I have a second.
Well, before we entertain that motion, I did want to at least ask the executive director, and maybe she can defer, pushing this application out. What does that mean?
Okay, so at some point, I'm sure either Chuck, Stacy, or Bruce will intercede. But my understanding is for us to do that, to delay action on this application, we would need to ask the applicant if they would agree to an extension. I have asked the applicant, and they are not willing to extend the application. So if that is factual, that leaves you with some choices. My understanding is you could choose to not take action, but I believe in that instance, the matter would go to OAL, or you can vote. And however the vote goes, if the vote goes positive, then the application proceeds. If the vote does not, then it goes to OAL. And Stacy can explain what happens, or Bruce can explain what happens when things go to OAL. But I did reach out to DEP, both substantively and procedurally. I did discuss the substance of the issues. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about them because it's close, and I did ask them if they would be willing to extend, and they were not.
To follow up on the executive director's comment, under the CMP, it's section 7:50-4.56. If the Pinelands Commission fails to take an action one way or the other on this application, the executive director's determination shall be referred to the Office of Administrative Law for a hearing. And what that would mean, I think we need to work out some details, but DEP would be presenting the case with one deputy attorney general, and Pinelands staff would be defending the application with another deputy attorney general. And so that is how we think it would go, but it would have the possibility of two of the state's environmental agencies litigating against each other in a public forum.
Mr. Chairman, I make this motion because I don't want to be put in a position where I am required to vote against an application of our sister service, the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, in doing something that they feel they need to do. But by the same token, I don't want to avoid my obligation as a Pinelands Commissioner to do what I feel the CMP requires us to do, which is to take every action possible to preserve and protect, preserve forest and habitat. All I am asking by this motion is that we have our staff examine with the applicant these alternative technologies that were raised by the public. The applicant did not respond to the public during the application process. We don't have their answers. Commissioners Prickett and Lloyd and I submitted not one but two memos to each of you, as our DAG has pointed out, to raise questions about these that we think deserve answers. I don't want to have to vote on this before we have the answers about the alternative technologies. If there are ways to solve what the Forest Fire Service needs to have done, they need to have good visibility for that sector of the forest. I believe that there is a technological answer to resolve that. They have not addressed that question despite repeated efforts by the public to have them answer that question. I'm asking that we have our staff sit down with them and get that question answered. That's all I want to do. I want to make sure they get what they want and that we do our duty. That's all. So I make that motion.
While I understand Commissioner Lobauer's thoughts and his direction there, I do think we, as commissioners, have a job here to make a decision today. It sounds like the executive director has extended the opportunity for the applicant to extend this application, and they've declined. So we are, unfortunately, Commissioner Lobauer, between a rock and a hard place here. We need to, in my mind, make a decision. And I think that we owe that to the applicant. If it doesn't move forward, it doesn't move forward. If it does, it does.
Chairman, respectively, I think we're an autonomous body. We can't be railroaded into taking an action by any applicant. And I'll point out to my fellow commissioners, this application was started by the Forest Fire Service over 2 years ago. They didn't bring it here. They didn't bring it to the Pinelands Commission until mid-May. So we are acting promptly. We were prepared to vote on this last month. It was taken out of our hands by something beyond our control, third-party litigation. I think that there is still information that the applicant has not produced that I, as a commissioner, would like to see them produce. I'm interested to know whether other commissioners agree with me that there should be that information before we make a vote. Otherwise, our vote is meaningless. So I make the motion to table.
I disagree that any vote that I cast here today may be meaningless.
Chairman Rowland?
Yes.
Apparently, I'm allowed to generically explain the conversations I had with the department about this matter. What does that mean?
You discussed these issues.
I discussed every issue raised in your letter with both the Assistant Commissioner of Natural and Historic Resources and Greg McLaughlin, whose title I can't remember. I believe he's the head of the Forest Fire Service. And they were not in agreement with what you had put in your letter. Is that good?
Yes.
I had extensive discussions with them repeatedly.
Go ahead, Mr. Howell.
I had a question. Is there something analogous here to the alternative septic system treatment, in that I would imagine before you had that program, someone would approach the commission and say, I'd like to put in a septic system, and we'd have to say no. And then the result of that kind of confrontation was several different types of technologies were investigated, and there's sort of a Pinelands area-wide system for looking at these alternatives to a conventional septic system. To my mind, there's a little bit of a parallel here, and I just sort of, at least in intent, if not in the procedure, and I'm sort of wondering what might be possible to have a similar thing related to fire systems.
No, I mean, it would seem like it should be, but it's not. The other thing I would like to point out is that this application was reviewed by staff and found to be consistent with the comprehensive management plan. It's a public application. It's a straightforward application. We're not allowed to say, hey, why don't you look at this? It's not part of that process. Doesn't mean we don't have discussions with applicants when they come in, but as part of the review of this kind of application, that's not there. But we do discuss things. It's not like we have blinders on.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, in our first memo to the commissioners, we pointed out that an early draft of this very resolution we're being asked to vote on today included a paragraph that said any future applications the staff recommends that the Forest Fire Service sit down with our staff and review alternative technologies. The staff wanted to see this happen. That's all I'm asking for to happen. I don't see it in the current resolution. It should be. All right, and okay, so it's in the letter, not in our package that we're voting on, and it talks about future applications, not this one. I would like to see that action happen with this one, otherwise it's meaningless.
By doing that, Mark, you're imposing requirements on an applicant that are outside of the purview of the comprehensive management plan.
May I?
Yes.
I believe that this application violates the comprehensive management plan. The comprehensive management plan provides that all clearing shall be limited to that which is necessary to accommodate the activity, use, or structure which is permitted by this plan. I don't think that the tree clearing is necessary to reach the goals of the Forest Service. I think I support the Fire Service fire detection program. We need that program, but we don't, in my view, they haven't met the requirement of the CMP to demonstrate that that we've limited the extent of the necessary tree clearing. I think the tree clearing, from what I've looked at, can be done without the fire detection services can be done without any tree clearing whatsoever. Let me address the question about the tabling. If I understand correctly, if we table it, it goes to OAL. If it doesn't achieve 8 votes, it goes to OAL. I agree with Commissioner Lobauer. I'd rather table it and for this commission to take the position that we think more work needs to be done on this application. If it goes to OAL, that's where the work could be done. In the commission, I think you may recall, not that we were all here, 23 years ago, the Forest Service made nearly the same application to the commission for the clearance of 4.6 acres, I believe. That matter went to OAL. It was then settled at OAL for 2.7 acres. I don't think OAL is the best way to do this, but frankly, I don't see another way. I don't think, I'm not prepared to vote to approve this today because I don't think it complies with the CMP. I would prefer to see it tabled. I suppose the alternative, if we don't table it, is then we'll take the votes on the merits, and if it fails, then it's going to go to OAL anyway. But as I said, I feel it's more appropriate, I think, to table it. But I think I understand the issues.
So before we get into the merits of the resolution and the executive director's recommendation, we do have a motion for tabling from Commissioner Lobauer. Do we have a second on that?
Yes, but second.
All right. Being that it sounds like this may be a little split down the middle here, let's do a roll call on that motion for tabling. I'm sorry? No, let's discuss, let's get to the tabling, and then if it gets tabled, this matter's done. If it doesn't get tabled, we'll discuss the merits of the application.
I'm sorry, does he have more information that we need to know before making our decision? I didn't understand what Nancy said.
He was going to discuss the regulatory issues regarding this application.
Sure, that are separate from whether we table it or not.
Chuck, you can answer that question better than I can.
Yeah, I was just going to provide a review of what our regulations require and try to clarify the issue to some extent. The commissioners have to decide at what point they would like me to do that.
If you need that now, I'm not opposed to that.
I'd rather hear it ahead of time.
I'm not opposed to that. Yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
Okay. The issue that Commissioner Lloyd is raising, I understand his interpretation. I can say that the staff over the decades has not taken that particular interpretation of Commissioner Lloyd. That would seem to extend it out, that interpretation of our regulations leads to requiring all applicants to address alternative approaches to their proposed development that would reduce forest clearing. To give an example that may be helpful, so if we received an application from a municipality to construct a municipal building or an addition to that municipal building on a wooded parcel, the interpretation that's being offered would lead the staff to asking multiple questions of, can the addition be constructed as a second story to the existing building, as opposed to clearing additional forest area on a parcel, even though it's a permitted use and it meets all of our environmental regulations. Even extended further out, that interpretation could lead us to, well, why couldn't the municipal building be constructed on another parcel that the township owns on the other side of a municipality? So the staff has not taken the approach that if an applicant demonstrates that their use is permitted, we make sure that the clearing that is being proposed is the minimum necessary. But we have not required applicants over the years to do a feasibility analysis of all the alternatives that may be available to that development. And again, I want to say I understand Commissioner Lloyd's interpretation of the rule, but as applied by the staff, we've simply, once it's demonstrated that it's permitted and it meets our environmental regulations, we make sure that the clearing that's proposed for that permitted development does not exceed that which is necessary, but we don't go all the way back and start from the point of, is that development, can it be moved or redesigned in another way? I see some quizzical looks. I'll be glad to try to answer some questions.
I mean, yeah, look, I submit that the staff is not reading the CMP. Let me say it again. The CMP requires that all clearing shall be limited to that which is necessary to accommodate the activity, the use, or the structure which is permitted by this plan. You know, I submit that the interpretation of the staff is wrong, and that it's we're here to protect the Pinelands. We're here to protect the trees of the Pinelands. We should be applying the CMP in a way that protects the Pinelands, not the way that please, not in a way that meets the needs of the applicant, whether or not the applicant's a state agency or a municipality. That's one of the reasons I think that Commissioner Lobauer and I won't put, I'll say that I won't put words in Commissioner Lobauer's, that I would like to find a way to negotiate this with DEP rather than vote on the merits of the case. I think the merits, as I said, my view is that I can't vote to approve it because on the merits, I think it violates the CMP. That's not, you know, I'm not interested in getting into a standoff with a state agency or frankly with a municipality as well. And that's why we would like to find a way to sit down with DEP and negotiate. And then Nancy, I take your point that you had that discussion and they weren't willing. So it seems to me there are two ways.
It's not that they weren't willing to spend more time. They did discuss.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't. They weren't willing to extend. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to. Yeah, that's fine. So in my view, there are only two ways to get to this. One is to table, and the other one is not to approve. I'd rather table. So you know, I would support the motion to table as the better alternative.
And I would only say, because my hands are now tied, that I'm sitting here extraordinarily frustrated, but I'm curious if it would make a difference if I was able to tell you what DEP told me. But if it won't make a difference, then I'm going to stop being frustrated by it. But I had extensive conversations with them, and there's an op-ed running today that they wrote. I mean, they're, you know, so they have a very clear and strong opinion on it that only I know unless you read the op-ed. But so I'm frustrated by that. I'm just frustrated by the process.
If I may, I share your frustration. You know, we look like we're stuck in a process where we can't talk. And so, I mean, one way to deal with that, and you know, let me just throw it out, is to reopen the comment period so that you can tell us what DEP said, or the applicant can come in and do a presentation to us. I understand that. I understand this. So again, I think we're in the box. We either table it or not approve it. I would hope that we would not approve it if it gets there.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
My fellow commissioners, I think it's more clear than ever that tabling makes the most sense at this point. It's clear that even our executive director has information she can't share with us at this moment in time. So we're being asked to vote on something without that information. That she had conversations with DEP, with Forest Fire Service, perhaps, at a time when they did not know the sense of this commission. Today, we have the opportunity to give them a sense of where we stand. If we unite behind this motion to table, they will know that we feel more information is needed, that we feel there is some question. Let's remember, 3 months ago, they came to this commission and said they needed to clear cut more than 80 acres. They felt firmly that that's what they needed. Then they reduced it to 16 acres after conversations with our staff. Is that really what they need? The public asked, are you going to come back later if you find that 16 acres isn't enough and you're going to expand, you're going to ask the commission again to clear cut more? I think that we need to have them address the questions that the public first asked, that I am now asking, several other commissioners are asking. What about alternative technologies that won't require any clear cutting? Tell us what your answers are. Tell us how much it's going to cost you to clear cut. That's not in the application. They made a big deal about the replacement of the tower would cost $483,000. That's out of the question. We don't know how that compares with the cost of clear cutting. We don't know how that compares with the cost of video technology. Okay. I think that we definitely need more information if we are to do our job fairly and appropriately and balance the needs, the clear needs of the Forest Fire Service, which I do not dispute, and our responsibility to the CMP. Thank you.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I don't believe the reduction in acreage, just let me say 1 second. I don't believe the reduction in acreage, just to be technically clear, was based on staff's input. DEP had a bunch of stakeholder meetings, met with landowners and local people, and then they made that decision separate from us.
Okay, Jane, you had something?
May I interject, Chair?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm having a really hard time. I'm so sorry I'm not there to hear. I didn't hear the summation of why you appointed people. I have to walk into this closing now. But I am with Commissioner Lowenbauer on this. I don't see the need to vote on it today and to table it. That would be my vote.
If I can just quickly, I think we've lost sight of sort of where the process is, and I just want to make sure that the record is clear. So first of all, everyone keeps saying a motion to table. Under Robert's rules, it's not a motion to table, it's a motion to continue to another day. Secondly, with regard to the CMP, what the CMP provides in 4.56 is the commission either has to approve the determination of the executive director or refer the determination.
I'm sorry, but I am very, very sorry that I have to, can I get back on this?
Absolutely.
I'm going to be tied up for at least 20 minutes.
Yeah. Jane, if you got to go, go ahead and.
Delay the vote now?
Yeah, we can do.
Well, hey, Jane, when we get. Jane, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So when we get to the point of a vote, we will ask someone to give you a call, and if you're available, we'll grab you at that time. If you're not, then unfortunately we'll move on with the meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Galetta.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, it's 10:29. I really need to sign off in a couple of minutes. There's a couple things happening. Is there a chance that we could do the vote for a table and then the vote for the resolution sooner rather than later?
Well, I was working towards that, but I have a feeling there's going to be some more discussion on this. So it sounds like we need to ask Commissioner Lobauer to amend his motion to continue, not to table. So
amended. Same difference.
I just want to make sure for the record it's accurate.
The motion to continue.
And we had do we have a second on
That
that?
is Candy.
That was Candy. Okay, you amend your second. There we go. So is there any other information that we need regarding that action? Is there any other information that commissioners need regarding that action? Okay.
I don't need either. Is Jane still on the phone? And Chuck? I mean, Jane and Paul both?
Paul, I believe you're still there, right?
I am.
And Jane, you're not. Jane? She stepped off. Okay. So did you?
I'm here.
There you go. So on the motion to continue, Nancy, if you could do roll call.
Commissioner Jammer back.
yes to continue.
And what's this?
This is a motion to continue the application, the informal tabling.
Let me just reiterate what Stacy just said. It goes to OAL if this motion passes. Okay.
Goes to OAL so a yes vote is to table or to continue, a no vote is to continue on with this application here today. So everybody got that?
To address this application
Yes,
today.
address this application further.
And may we please call Commissioner Janarone, who's not on the phone. She expressed an interest to vote on this. It has to be called.
We can try calling her. I think she said 20 minutes. So I was, what's that?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's take the straw vote, and if her vote is necessary, then we might want to hold the vote until she gets back on.
Vote to continue with these matter will go to the Office of Administrative Law with the commission against the executive staff and the.
Yes.
Commissioner Ashman.
I guess, yes. I can't hear what you're doing.
Nancy, do you have your microphone on?
You're voting to, Candy, you're voting to continue, meaning we will go to the Office of Administrative Law on this matter. Okay.
I think we know where Candy stands,
Right.
and she said yes.
Commissioner Avery. No. Commissioner Barr. No. Commissioner Sheila. No. Commissioner Galletta.
No.
Commissioner Howell.
Yes.
Commissioner Janarone. We didn't get her back yet. Okay. Commissioner Lloyd.
Yes.
Commissioner Lowbauer.
Yes.
Commissioner Pikaleski.
No.
Commissioner Prickett.
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn's not here. Chairman Erlin.
No.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going anywhere. Nope.
Okay. So now we have the resolution in
But if we got
front of
Kane,
us. Do we have a motion on that resolution?
4, 5, 6. No. Doesn't matter.
Bass River State Forest Fire Tower Resolution. Do we have a motion on that application?
I'll motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Now, further discussion on that application. I think we bandied this about, but Mr. Avery, you have something.
Offer up your World Peace Solution.
Yes, Mr. Second was Mr. Barr.
Wait.
Mr. Chairman,
One second, Mr. Avery had something, I'm sorry.
Well, I have a question of Chuck's, and maybe he can incorporate it in his response here. My understanding of this application is that the Forest Fire Service uses this specific tower for two purposes. One is the detection of forest fires. The other is as a command center, to fight a forest fire in one of the most fire-prone areas of the Pinelands. Is my understanding correct, or am I incorrect on that?
That understanding is correct. The fire tower serves two purposes. The first is obviously to spot fires, and the second is the coordination of the activities when fighting the fires.
Thank you, Chuck.
Chuck, you had something to add before Mr. Avery.
Well, I thought I might follow up on Commissioner Lowbauer's discussion at the very beginning of the meeting about language, whether it's included in the report or it's included in the resolution, addressing the need for the commission staff and the Department of Environmental Protection to discuss this issue, resolve it, come back to the commission and report so it doesn't happen on future applications. My suggestion for the commission to consider is whether they would be amenable to adding language to the resolution that recognizes the issue that's being raised by this particular application with our regulations and directs the staff to meet with the Department of Environmental Protection and to report back to the commission on any future, to avoid this situation occurring in the future. So to say that clearly, so that this application would move forward, but it would be clear to the staff and to the commission that this issue needed to be addressed before any future applications arrived for the commission's consideration. And that language would be included in any resolution that the commission may act on today.
Any thoughts or questions for Chuck?
Yeah, on Chuck's last point, I think that, pushing forward with negotiations and discussions with DEP is a good thing. I don't think we need to do that today. I think it's a broader discussion. For instance, I think we should have a discussion with them about all the fire towers in the Pinelands, how they're going to meet their fire detection needs, how they're going to meet their command center needs, consistent with the CMP. And so I think we should pursue that. I just don't think we have to pursue it today. With respect to, Alan, your point about command center, my understanding in the research that I've done on this is that use of video technology would provide an ability to have command center and frankly have 24/7 eyes on the fire and eyes on the management, the command necessities, whereas the fire tower, as I understand it, is only staffed during the day. So I think the command center concerns, I share them, but I think that they could be covered perhaps better with a video camera.
Commissioner, I think that from my perspective, I think there's some merit in the idea of cameras or drones or whatever in terms of the detection. I don't know whatever the technology is. I belong to the Luddite Society. I don't know much about this new technology, but I do think that the area should be cleared primarily because of the command purpose of this tower. It's a very volatile, very extensive forested area, as we know. I guess they use this for like 200 square miles, the application says. I know that many years ago in the 60s, there was a terrible fire down here and 3 volunteers from Eagleswood Township went in the woods and didn't come out. And you don't ever want to put firemen at risk. And that is my concern here, is that the longer we delay this, the chance of putting somebody at risk is greater than moving ahead. And I don't know enough about how the Forest Fire Service fights its fires to feel that I can make a judgment overriding their recommendations. It's pure and simple is where I'm coming from here today. And I do think it meets the standards of the plan. I agree with Chuck. It's a non-native species that they propose to cut. Loblolly is not a native species, as I recall.
That is correct.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add.
Yes.
Director Horner, I appreciate what you're trying to do by suggesting that the language be inserted into the resolution. However, I'll point out to the commissioners that it doesn't impact the application before us today. It would only impact future applications, as if the one before us today doesn't matter. Like this issue of which technology is most appropriate, which one is most cost effective, which one addresses the need that Commissioner Avery was just pointing out about command center as well as early detection. Which one does it? Fact is, no one on this commission really knows. We know that the public has pointed out to us that video technology does do those things better. We know that the Forest Fire Service, deny as they might that information that was in my last memo was correct or not, we know that they utilize video technology in other locations. Not here in the Pinelands, they don't. We know that they've relied on it for the past 16 months at 2 locations. We know that the fire tower technology, putting a person in a fire tower, is 90-year-old technology. It's so old that the very fire tower before us in this application today was deemed too old to try to build up taller, right? There's so much that we don't know here, but it's quite possible that video technology is the answer. The public first raised that as a possibility in 1995. The Forest Fire Service didn't look into it then. Once again, the public raised it this time. The Forest Fire Service chose not to answer them. And we don't have their information about what it costs, how effective it is, how it could replace as a command center. I do not sit here as a Pinelands Commissioner and pretend to know better than the Forest Fire Service about what technology is the best or what their needs are. I simply offer to you that we have a different responsibility. We have a responsibility to the habitat and to the forest. We need to blend those. I merely asked that the Forest Fire Service be called to account, be forced to tell us Tell us why they feel this old technology is the right answer. Okay? I appreciate that we're going to force them to do that in future applications. I wish we had done so in this one. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so Commissioner Lowbrower has now put all new information on the
Ma'am,
record.
no, we can't. Thank you.
Commissioner Lowbrower has now put new information on the record, so now
Which is going to be in the minutes.
but not on the record before the vote. So now I've been given some latitude to tell you what the Department of Environmental Protection told me. So, and as I said, I spoke with the Assistant Commissioner and I spoke with the head of the Forest Fire Service. With regard to the cameras that they have in Monmouth County and Ocean County, those were put in as part of a mitigation effort because some town built a water tower in front of their tower. They have been monitoring them. They have not had success with them. They have frequent losses of service. They have frequent loss working with the company. They haven't had a great relationship with them. So they have tested those cameras and they have not found them to be successful for their needs. Particularly, and those are not in the Pinelands. The Pinelands presents different technological problems for them because it's extraordinarily flat, unlike other parts of the country. You pointed out Oregon, where there are mountains, because they have to triangulate. I'm repeating things now. I am not a forest fire fighting specialist. Never will be. I'm not in a position to tell DEP about it. But so they did test those cameras, and it was not successful for them. So it's unfair to say they have them and they're working. It didn't work for them. They're continuing to look into it. They're continuing to look into going forward and looking at all of their towers and other alternatives they could use. So I just wanted to tell you that. They have been testing it. It didn't work for them. The other thing they will tell you is they don't just use the towers for observing fire. They direct firefighting from the tower. Second by second, minute by minute. That's the function of their towers. That's how they do firefighting. Again, parroting, not me. And I had extensive conversations with them. They feel very strongly about it. It's not like something they didn't consider. They have considered it. They continuously consider it. It's a very significant issue for them.
Thank you.
So,
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
Sure.
Just
Bruce, go ahead.
To the extent that the back and forth between the executive director and Commissioner Lowbauer referred to items that are outside the record, when the commission votes, it should be limited to what is contained in, or attached to the June 22nd, 2018 cover letter and executive director's report. And in no means do I suggest that the commentary back and forth was not helpful, but ultimately the decision needs to be made based on what's currently in the record.
Commissioner Chila. Chila had something first, yes.
Well, what I have clearly is outside the record too, but did they ask the municipality to cut their water tower down so you can see?
They had extensive back and forth.
And what was the final result?
They put up some cameras. But, you know, it's in an area where it's not a significant fire issue for them. Again, that's why they put up some cameras. That was the mitigation.
Just make sure we're using the mics on the back and forth so everybody can hear. Go ahead.
With respect to the record, Mr. AG, we can't unring the bell. It's here. I agree with you. It's a problem. I also would suggest, though, that the record, the existing record that we all agree on is the whole application file, some of which was what was described in some of the memos here. But I understand that today's discussion becomes difficult. But I think the record is everything in the application file, and then I'll let you make the judgment about what we do about today. But everybody heard what was said, so I don't know how we unring that bell.
So I'm going to chime in here on a different angle. It's an angle that I take quite frequently, I think, and that's the rights of the applicant, not just this applicant or any applicant. They've submitted an application, from what I've understood today, that is a permitted use and does not violate our environmental standards. If any applicant, me, you, any applicant to any board submits an application that is permitted, there should be a certain expectation that that applicant has. If we want to change the standards by which that applicant needs to look at alternatives or needs to work with the commission or any board to find alternatives, then we need to change our rules. That's how I feel. When it comes to the question of necessity, which has been thrown out here today, I, for one, agree with Vice Chairman Avery in that when the Forest Fire Service, whose job it is to fight fires every day, says that this is necessary, I am going to take their word over most. So I don't think that we should be giving applicants a moving target. We have a set of rules. They look at those rules and they file an application. I think it's our job, even more and above and beyond what Commissioner Lobauer said about preserving and protecting the Pinelands, is to enforce the CMP. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Just to be clear, go ahead, Candy.
I would just like to comment that we tried that before, and we're right back where we started from. And I think that this needs a whole lot more work before we approve it.
Just to be clear, I do not think we're changing the CMP. I do not think we're moving the goalpost. The CMP, in my mind, is very clear. The fact that it's been interpreted a different way before doesn't mean that that's right. It's never been, if you will, litigated to a conclusion. I think the CMP is very clear that we're supposed to protect the Pinelands from cutting down forests, and if we don't have to cut them down to meet the applicant's purpose, we should not approve this. I think my position, saying that I'm not ready to approve is in my view, my reading and staying true to the comprehensive management plan, not trying to amend it.
Any other comments regarding? Rick, go ahead.
I'd like to talk about the report, some of the specifics in the report.
Rick, could you bring the mic a little closer so
I
I can
can.
get you on record there? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to address some of the items in the report. I'm glad that the proposal isn't to cut down the 81 acres of trees that was mentioned during public comments. Instead, just talking about clear cutting 7 different areas, totaling the amount of 16 acres. By doing that, it sounds like the fire tower will continue to be viable. And also by doing that, you create 7 different areas, open up the forest in 7 different areas where different species can come in and hopefully thrive, creating little environments for the potential T&E species in the area. I think it's very important to have a long-term plan, maybe a 20-year plan, or maybe even a longer time span, to have a plan to manage this area. If you want to keep the viability of the fire tower in existence, and we want to keep habitats open for T&E species, clear cutting here and there can benefit in those circumstances. But I think we have to look at the financial aspect to the Forestry Service. If you have a long-term plan, they can plan for the finances for the clear cutting over a period of time. If we have a long-term plan, you can have rotational clear cutting so that the people that live in the area don't drive down the road and miss their forest, all of a sudden. I mean, I have sympathy for the public that live there because they appreciate the forest. They like the ambience of the trees, the white pines and the low-leaf pines, and that forest atmosphere. If we had rotational cutting, it wouldn't have to be so dramatic when you cut down so many trees. Rotational could mean that you leave the taller trees up front, you cut trees down behind those, and then 10 years later, you cut the front trees down and the back trees are there that the public can see. Not only benefits the public, it benefits the species, creating different T&E and other habitats for living things. So I would like to, I would hope that in the conditions of this report that we have a long-term plan for maintaining the view of the forest tower and developing the different habitats and helping the public out and not shocking them to clear cutting, and also dealing with the financial aspects of the clear cutting. I do have a concern about how the T&E species are handled. The forest old growth forest species. I know I reviewed the file, and there was mention of the barred owl in the file, which is a forest species. And the remedy to whether it's the barred owl or other species is to, as you're going through the forest, as they're preparing to clear cut the forest, they identify trees that might have nesting capability, and they save that tree. Well, if you can imagine being a barred owl or some other forest tree or some other forest species, you know, you're probably not going to be happy with one tree. You know, all your cover has been cut away. So I know we heard today about Woodland Township. They were doing a T&E survey before they developed the infill area. This application to me is a little different from ones that I've been familiar with in that T&E surveys haven't been done before the application is approved. And so I would like to see these old growth trees. I mean, they're very valuable. I mean, you just can't grow old growth trees for those animals that like to live there in a short period of time. It takes years and years and years. So I think a survey needs to be done to evaluate those areas that have this old growth and determine whether we need to have a buffer around any of those trees that have nesting capabilities. I don't know what the buffer would be, but again, I think just leaving one tree with a nesting capacity in the middle of a clear-cut area is useless. And I'm concerned about the precedent that if we don't do a survey first and wait until, you know, the cutting of trees is done, I just don't like that kind of a precedent to be presented here or be approved here. So I'd like to see a survey done of these areas for T&E species and the appropriate buffers that would support those if they are found. And I'd like to see a long-term plan developed with the commission staff and with the Forest Service and the DEP to develop a long-term plan so that everybody benefits. Certainly a fire tower visibility and fire suppression is a benefit to all the public and needs to be the primary concern here. But forest management is very dynamic. And I think a lot of things, a lot of stakeholders can be addressed if you do this over a period of time in a dynamic way. So I thank you for your time.
This is a discussion amongst the commissioners. The public record is closed, as you know. This is us debating we're discussing the executive director's report in the resolution that is before us now, which was published in our agenda. Are there any other comments from commissioners on this application? I think we'll do as we did last time. If we need her, we'll call her. Is everybody agreeable to that? Yeah. If we need Jane, we'll call her. So, all right, seeing no more comments, Nancy, let's do a roll call if we could on, what's this, resolution 1990-0868.029, Bass River State Forest Fire Tower.
Commissioner Ashman?
No.
Commissioner Avery?
Yes.
Commissioner Barr?
Yes.
Commissioner Chila?
Yes.
Commissioner Galetta?
Yes.
Commissioner Howell?
Abstain.
Commissioner Jannerone? Commissioner Lloyd?
Abstain.
Commissioner Lowbauer?
Abstain.
Commissioner Pikaliski?
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett?
Abstain.
Chairman Erlin?
Yes.
Six. No. Oh, here we go.
Okay, so we go to OAL.
Shameport.
All right. Just a quick question on that process, if I could, to the lawyers in the room. So we have a executive director's report that recommends approval, yet we have a I don't know, a stalemate amongst the commission. What is our process and what is our argument moving forward? What is the commission's argument in this action?
I think that's going to require some discussion because it's never happened before. To be perfectly candid. I think there will be, DEP will present its case and through a deputy, and the DAG representing, for lack of a better word, the Pinelands Commission staff, because ultimately this will come back.
This is an interesting case in that the commission is now in an adversarial position to its staff. The executive director's recommendation report, you have decided that you're not going to approve it in accordance with the regulations. I think where this will wind up, in all honesty, is that DEP and the commission staff will be represented either jointly by one DAG or separately by two DAGs. The commission will be represented by its own DAG. And unfortunately, that puts you in a position where you cannot use your staff for the litigation matter. So Chinese walls are going to have to be constructed. In my experience here, it has never happened, and I've been here almost over 15 years now. This is a new road for everyone.
Okay, well, we will stay tuned for, I'm assuming you guys, for our next meeting, there will be some kind of bullet points with a path forward for everybody so that we're clear as a commission. Well, you'll figure something out and give us a path forward so that we understand as commissioners what direction we're taking.
I mean, I don't want to get deeply into this legal debate today, but just to point out, I don't think the staff has a role to play in this OAL hearing. The commission has acted, not the staff, and it's the commission and DEP. But I understand that'll all be sorted out.
Yeah,
We will sort it out and take our time because this is unprecedented.
All right, so we're going to move on next to some additional applications or resolutions that we have for approval. First is a resolution with 3 different public applications, one for the demolition of a grist mill, lean-to in Batstow, one for solar panels at the joint base, and one for reconstruction of a dam in Medford. Do we have a motion on this? Thank you. We have a second.
Second.
All right, are there any, first off, any comments or anything from staff on this?
No, Mr. Chairman.
None. Okay, are there any questions or comments from commissioners?
Chairman, I'll just note that I appreciate that the application for the solar field is being done over a parking lot, which I think is a very appropriate use for a solar field. Thanks.
All right.
I'd like to just say I hope this lean-to in the future, money is allotted over a period of time, whether it's through donations or through the state legislature to restore the lean-to, restore Batstow in every way possible. It's a wonderful state park, and I'd like to see it kept up. Thank you.
All right, any other thoughts on any one of these 3 applications? All right.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to comment that I think it's unfortunate to handle them this way, with 3 applications on the same motion. I'm not going to disrupt the application, but I just think it's more appropriate to do them separately.
You look like you want to comment, Chuck.
My only comment was that that's the discretion of the commission. The commission can direct us in the future how we provide resolutions, or that's.
I think if they've ever been, minor applications, we've tried to lump them together whenever
correct.
possible.
For administrative convenience, we've attempted to do this.
I think it's sort of like a consent docket. It's a
I agree.
document.
That's what I was looking for.
And I guess the other thing, the only time we do pull applications out when we think there's a recusal coming, because then, the person is recused from one thing, but not all of them. But I think, Candy, hate to disagree with you, but I think this is an efficiency measure. And frankly, if the commission, I appreciate the staff presenting it in this way. If the commission wanted to sever one off of a vote, we could do that.
We would do
So
that
that's
early
not-
on.
That's always, yeah.
When we get the
always
packet, we
available
could
to us.
always look to do that. So, all right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that resolution passes. Next, we have the approval of 2 waivers for single-family dwellings. Do we have a motion there?
I'll move it. Second.
Again, anything from staff on this?
No, Mr. Chairman, unless there's questions.
None from me. Anything from commissioners? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Paul, you still on the phone? I thought I heard him click. All right, next we have a denial of a waiver of strict compliance. Do we have a motion there? So we have a second? All right, Candy seconds. Chuck, you want to go through this? I know we go through this every time we do it.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. This is an applicant who is actually asking for the commission to deny their waiver of strict compliance. The applicant is interested in pursuing acquisition under something in our regulations. It's called the Limited Practical Use Acquisition Program. And that is for someone that it's denied a waiver of strict compliance to develop a parcel. They need that denial as one of the application steps to attempt to secure acquisition by the state under that program.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that matter moves on. All right, next we have a resolution relating to a certification of an ordinance or multiple ordinances in Egg Harbor Township.
I'd like to move it, please.
Second.
Any questions or first anything, Susan, anything from you on this?
Not unless you have a question.
Any questions? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right.
Abstain from that.
You abstain. Okay, 1 abstention, Mr. Howell. All right, we have, now we're going to have public comment on pending public development applications where the record is not closed. So this is not our general public comment session. This is, there are 2 applications, it looks like, that are pending in front of us. One is a demolition of a shopping center in Pemberton Township. One is a construction of a rec center or rec complex in Waterford Township. Those are the 2 matters in which we can take public comment on right now. Is there anybody for that, for those matters? Once, twice? Okay, we will we'll see them next month. We'll close that portion of public comment. We have a bunch of master plans and ordinances that do not require commission action, but is there any comments or anything that you need to tell us regarding any of those? No, okay. All right. Next, we have the resolution adopting the 2019 budget. Candy moves it? Mark seconded, okay. So we have a brief presentation on the budget. We did.
The budget has already been presented to P&B. There was a rousing standing ovation and applause after. So I can do this as quickly or as slowly as we like. It's just.
I think the highlights, in my mind, are appropriate, but unless commissioners need more than that.
Highlights. I'm using the microphone. I'm using the microphone, leaning into the microphone. Okay, you want me to do the slide thing, Paul, or you want to do it? You have it? We're going quickly. You ready? This is the abbreviated version of the budget. Okay, we have 4 budgets. Every year we have 4 budgets, although I'm suspecting next year we might not have 4 budgets. So we will go in through them individually. Operating fund first, that's our biggest budget. Revenue side of the house, your state appropriation was increased by $150,000 again. That was good news. The state supplemental funding remains static. That's where we get fringe and indirect. It's nowhere near enough, and it has not gone up in years. Application fees, we did well in FY18, and assuming we will do equally well in FY19. And my understanding is we've already had 2 big checks come in. So we're very excited. The grant special purpose line is big. We have 2 new grants coming in to the science office. One is an EPA grant, and one is through Drexel and the Academy of Sciences. Did we get the money? Not yet. It's coming. Makes the budget a little flexible. Checks in the mail. And we've been spending it. And then we have other, which is just a conflagration of things like the interest account and some other small things. You have the details in your packet of all the background on each of these items, both the details of the money and the notes that go with it. I encourage you to read it because it's where all the information is. Then we have the fund balance reserves. You can see where those come from, the computers, the administrative stuff that comes from Pinelands Conservation Fund, balancing the budget on revenue. Here's what we're spending. You see salary and wage for FY19 is increased for a few reasons. You may recall at the end of FY17, we did a salary adjustment with increases for all staff. That was about $277,000. In addition, 2 part-time people went full-time. We hired 2 people. Interest fringe benefits, because we have no control over that. It's based on the number of people. It goes up every year. I don't know, Jessica, if we had a new number this year, the multiplier.
He's about 10% usually. He's about 10%.
Question.
Yep.
So the fringe benefits are $1.8 million, and the state supplemental, which I understand is supposed to cover that, is $647. So we're $1 million short there.
Yes, we are.
And which means we have to take it from the other lines in the budget.
Yes, you are correct.
And has that always been the case? Has it been flat? I thought it rose with the fringe.
My
benefits, but
understanding,
it's
and
not.
this precedes me, my understanding was when the commission unionized, the then administration committed to funding certain things, including that line, and then didn't. So it's just stayed flat. That there was the commission thought it was going to get ever increasing numbers, and it didn't.
My recollection, for what it's worth, and this could be wrong, is that when Governor Florio was chair, he negotiated this in the first instance, and I frankly I didn't think it was flat, but it is now.
No one thought it was flat, and it has been flat for quite some time. You are correct.
Thank you.
The supply line, a lot of that, I mean, in the operating budget, there's grant money. So it's not just the appropriate. The NPS money is in the operating budget. The EPA grants are in the operating budget. So a lot of the expenditures are coming out of grant funds. And I'll try to point those out. So in supplies, that's a lot of grant funds. Professional services, you have the USGS monies coming out of there. So that's why that's so big, because John Benelfi's still in the room, is just wheeling and dealing money all over the place. Coming and going, spending and doing. A lot of it's passed through to USGS. So it makes it difficult for us to explain the budget because it looks odd, and that's why that number's so high. Other services, here with my own handwriting, training, software, something else. What else is in there?
Other grant items.
Other grant stuff is in there. Maintenance and rent is down because we didn't put away any more money for painting this year. We felt we've stocked away enough money to paint the building. I think we have $120,000 sitting. So we saved that sitting on the side waiting. Improvements and acquisitions, that's grant stuff in there too. So you'll see our expenditures, as always, match our revenue precisely. Balance. Larry may ultimately.
We don't have a choice with that, do we?
No, we have no choice. We have no choice. Kirkwood Cohansey, this is old, this was $5 million many, many, many years ago. We're down to $114,000. We're going to spend it. Is Larry here? Larry, are you spending this money? Larry, are you spending the money this year? Kirkwood Comanche? Good.
Yeah, he's taking a trip.
We should all take a trip. The Katie Fund, we've talked about the fact that while we're doing the exhibit, we're also going to be doing the garden. This is money we've had for many, many years that we've never, haven't been focused on. So that's where that money's going. We're going to put a path in. We're going to do new plantings. We're going to put memorial benches.
Nancy, where did that money come from? Was that a grant?
No, well, was it originally a grant or was it all donations from the family? This was an employee who was killed years and years ago. So money would trickle in, and so this is, I think, a really good use for it. PCF. As you know, the Pinelands Conservation Fund is funded by assorted large agreements made over the years that started with a connective line adjacent to the Garden State Parkway. There have been other infusions along the way, although there have not been any in quite some time, so the numbers are coming down. This is where you have land acquisition, looking for my list of projects, there it is, conservation planning and research, community planning, design, education, and outreach. So in those four categories, you can see we have some personnel costs, and then if there's other things, they're there. So on land acquisition, we have money to purchase land, no new rounds, Susan. These are just things that have carried over from last year that we hopefully will wrap up this year. Conservation planning and research, I have a big long list of projects, but just so you know, the kinds of things that we bill out of this account include the septic pilot program. We did rules, and Ed Wengrowski reviews things. That comes out of these funds. Roadside plant management, we're going to talk about Black Run rulemaking again. That comes out of here. We are thinking about going in to get some money for a Barnegat Bay stormwater research project. We'll fund some of that out of here. So this is where we do some interesting projects out of the planning office and are looking at about $334,000 this year on those projects. Most of it is salary. Some professional services, I'm guessing it's USGS again on the stormwater project. Yeah. And then community planning and design, a lot of PDC expense comes out of there. The bank administration, our endless desire to adopt PDC rules. Also, this year in there, the Pinelands Infrastructure Trust Fund work that Larry's been talking about, we'll pay some salary out of here for that. And Susan and her staff have been doing a comprehensive review on the clustering provisions. There may be some new rulemaking on that. We'll pay some of that out of here. Again, salary and some other things.
Nancy, I have a question about the Barnegat Bay project.
Yes.
Is that a result of some of the presentations that have been made to the commission over the years? Because this is the first I think
This is a project that will be looking at the effectiveness of stormwater basins and other stormwater management facilities, actually measuring in a way how effective they are at doing what they're supposed to do in the Barnegat Bay watershed. I don't know if we've ever presented on that.
No, you'll be carrying
Right.
it more.
It's, and there's money available, so it's a good moment for us. So this is a new research project for us.
Nancy, where did that money come from?
It hasn't come, oh, the DEP has money.
DEP
DEP has money. Yep, and we're going for it. Well, now they're going to be mad. And then education and outreach. We have the visitor center in there, some salary for that. We pay for the World Water Monitoring Challenge we do every year. The money comes out of this fund for that. Is Tony still here? No. Tony McNichol is doing, he's been doing some interesting cultural things. He's got a field school study that we'll talk about at the end of this quickly. The funding comes out of here for that. And we're thinking of putting our nose back into the byway project, and we may put some money towards that because it's just not doing well without us. So that's the PCF budget. Here's our staffing levels. You can see the executive office went up by a half because our new HR manager is full-time. Our prior HR manager was not. Similarly, in reg programs, we had a half-time employee who has gone full-time. Science office is up one. That's Dane, if he's still here after I might have embarrassed him. And we are now at 43 full-time employees. Here's how we pay for them. The majority of it does come from the operating fund, and then we fill in where we can. And don't forget, in the operating fund is the EPA grant money and the NPS money. So you're going to say, Nancy, that's bigger than your appropriation. Yes, it is, because that other money is in that same account, and that's where the salaries come from. We go back and forth trying to lean on the conservation fund, but then as we're watching it get smaller, now we're going back the other way. It's a balancing act. Initiatives. I had too many initiatives to fit on the page this year when I asked staff for initiatives. So we will complete the visitor center and the Katie Garden. We're still wanting to do the Black Run rule proposal. We still want to wrap up Kirkwood Cohansey. That might require some rules on water supply. Larry has talked to you about that extensively. And the PVC enhancement rule. I mentioned before that Susan's been looking at the cluster rules and their impacts. Has it been like 10 years already? Something? Yes. Right. And it's raised some issues that we recognize we need to deal with. So there may be some rules on that. The Pinelands Infrastructure Trust Fund. And in my heart of hearts, I'm hoping that actually might be its own source of money that we could use for admin, but we're not sure yet. But that's an initiative that we're already working on and will continue to work on through the next year. On the long-term economic monitoring side, Larry has talked to you about it. You've had a few presentations about, we did a review, we hired Rutgers, we had a bunch of meetings. So we're going to be making some changes there, including hopefully a new website with portals to all kinds of information, maybe some new indicators, and maybe some new special studies. I mentioned Tony's work on the field school in Chemung for cultural resources. Tony's been a real resource for doing interesting things on the cultural side. I expect there will be more, and I think that's good. I mentioned the Barnegat Bay project. JB was out in the field doing something last night, so we never really talked about it, but he has those 2 new grants he'll be working on. Just finished some EPA grants, which I'm hoping we'll be able to present to you in a reasonable and understandable way soon. And we have lots of other stuff going on. We have a lot of IT stuff going on that I've mentioned to you with Evan Bossett here, getting things current, making us way more digital and current. Donna Graham's been working on, lo and behold, trying to finally get all of our old microfilm files digitized. We have more paper and more microfilm than we know what to do with, and she's been working hard on that.
How far back does the paper go?
Donna, how far back does it go, the date on the microfilm? 1979.
Wow.
We have it all.
Wow.
We have everything except the one thing we ever need. I swear. Where is this? We don't have it, but we have everything else.
And you can't find it. You
No,
may have
we
it,
can't
but you
find
can't find it.
Can't find it until finally Betsy
I'll
goes
bet you-
into the barn and finds it.
I'll bet you Candy has some things that
She
you
might.
may not have, Donna. So.
So we're continuing to do all that kind of work that you don't usually hear about. Jessica Lynch is wildly, constantly replacing things and having things fixed. Things are old. It's a lot of work. We need a new sprinkler system this year. We had air conditioning repaired this year. So those things don't usually make it to initiatives, but we do manage the property, and it is a significant amount of work and expense for us. And that's the budget really fast. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. We have endless paper. Okay.
Okay. On the Pinelands Conservation Fund, there were a lot of personnel.
Mhm.
Is that just people that already work here? Or is that
Yes.
is it
No,
separate
those are-
contracts for them, or it's just a way of meeting their salaries?
That's salary. If you're working on those projects, you get paid from those funds for whatever, our timesheets are billed like lawyers. So, sorry.
Every 6 minutes?
I might be, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to reiterate what Nancy said. The Personnel and Budget Subcommittee has worked with the staff on the budget and has recommended full approval to the commission. So.
Excellent, excellent.
If I may, I just want to congratulate Nancy and the staff. We've gone through several dry years where you had to keep everything together and keep fighting for every nickel and dime so we could keep up operations going here. And it's great to see that we're entering a year where we're seeing a significant increase to our budget. We're restoring some of the personnel levels, and I'm just thrilled to see it happen. So congratulations to you.
All right. We had a motion and a second. Any other comments from commissioners? All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right. Moving on. We have one last resolution, which is the approval of the 2017 annual report. We have a motion and a second, and now we have something from Nancy.
I asked again why we do this, and I was reminded that there was some executive order from like Governor Corzine that makes us do it, so that's why we do it.
Yep. And it was reviewed in the P&I meeting. Presentation was given, and again, everybody was thrilled and agreed to move it to the full commission. So
I have a question about the report. Is this perhaps emailed to the municipalities in the area, or is there a way to advertise the yearly annual report, instead of just writing it and looking at it and forgetting about it? Is there a way we can?
Yes, we always put it on the website, and I'd be happy to email the municipalities and the counties if you would like us to do that. In previous years, we had mailed it to not the municipalities, but all of our repositories, Stockton, Burlington County College, and others have it there. We'd send it to the Legislative Services Office and the governor's office and the state library, but typically not to the towns, but we can do that. I could easily do that.
And to the municipal council as well.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I'm sure they get a copy of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, we used to always send them a copy, yeah.
I mean, I think this is, especially for someone that doesn't know a lot about what the commission does, you know, for someone that might be moving into the area or just interested in commission work without getting into all the detail, although there's a lot of detail in the report. This is a great document for people like that. Realtors, for example. Well, maybe this is too heavy for that situation, buying a house, but, you know, it's a good comprehensive report. And I just hope it can be used even more.
In the past, it's become it's been very useful. For example, when we did the last plan review report, that was one of the documents we were able to look back on because all the information has already been vetted and we've looked into it and things have been described in a way that's more succinct and easy for us to simply use again in describing our actions over the course of the past few years.
Chairman? I'm grateful for the tributes up front to Commissioners Brown and Hayes. I think that was very appropriate and very well written. And I'd like to ask, there are so many wonderful science programs that are described in here. I would love to see some of them actually presented at commission meetings. Like I was not aware of the endocrine disruption study. I don't know if we've talked about that here before, but I found that fascinating, and I'd love to hear more. I know JB must be the mastermind of that one, and so anyway, please do feel free to talk more about those with us. I'd love to hear about it. Thank you.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, we're moving on. So, we have now general public comment, for which I have 4 people registered here. I will add that the Bass River record is closed and it is now a legal matter. So, what's that? My agenda has that after general public comment, unless you need to do something in front of general public comment. Tell me now, so before I open the floor. Okay, so we're going to stick to general public comment there.
Yeah, just one point. The Bass River matter has been acted on by the commission, so it can be commented on now. There's nothing in front of us.
That's fine then? Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
I just wanted to make sure that the commissioners, you know, when if we decide to choose to comment or say anything, it's part of a legal matter now, right?
Seems so.
Yeah, so, all right, so first we have Carol Bitzberger.
I'm sorry, but I'm not clear as to whether I can say something. I'm from Bass River County.
If you want to step up to the mic and comment on Bass River, you're more than welcome to. But again, the commission's already taken its action, or inaction, for that matter.
I'm assuming that this is now moving on to the administrative law.
Paul's going to help you with that microphone.
I'm not used to this. if I understand correctly, it's now moving on to the Office of Administrative Law. Okay. Does the public get involved in that in any way?
I'm not familiar with that process, but by the head shaking of our attorneys, the answer is no.
Okay. I do want to thank the commissioners that it is moving on. And just to tell you a little bit about one of the people, and I've seen this, they've contacted the Oregon Fire Service, and they sent a link to his computer. And I actually went on, and you could see how they bring up the different scenes of the forest. And of course, their forest is much bigger than ours. And it was really fascinating. And we have taken the time to find out a lot about the system. So we haven't stopped. We're still looking into the area of technology. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe, Mr. Velzy, you're good. Carol, I'm sorry, but did you have something to say? You look like you're ready to chime in.
On the issue of whether the public can participate, if there's a role for the public in the OL proceeding, that will be one of the issues we will be looking into in the upcoming month.
Okay, thank you. All right, Rose Sweeney.
Bass River, and I just want to thank you. I know this is an unprecedented territory you guys have entered, and I appreciate the discussion. And thank you also for bringing up a lot of points that the public has really pushed. And I just want to be clear, you know, although we don't want these trees to come down, nobody's for forest fire. You know, we certainly appreciate the forest fires protection of our communities. We do understand that this is a staging area. I worked for the Bass River State Forest years ago in the 90s, and I supported the previous superintendent in fighting that original cut. I certainly feel like we've just been stuck in time a little bit, and if we could certainly look at new technologies to accomplish the same things, that would be fantastic. I feel like no one's really doing their homework on this particular stand of trees. It's really historic. The incendiary properties of these trees are much different than a scrub forest. This forest has taken several lightning strikes over the last 100 years, whereas a scrub forest would have burned down several times over. I hope maybe with this opportunity and this delay that we could maybe, you know, look into some of these things and maybe try to support, you know, other, you know, options. So I just want to thank you, and I really appreciate, you know, your efforts. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Candy, thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Candy.
You too.
Jeff Tittle.
Jeff Tittle, New Jersey Sierra Club. I just want to say that I think what happened today should never have had to happen, that this should have been able to been worked out in a compromise. You don't clear cut parts of a forest so you can see the forest. It makes no sense. You don't destroy the forest to fight forest fires. That's illogical and ridiculous. But what I want to talk about, since it should have been talked about, is there's so much new technology. And in Sierra Club, we're involved in forest fighting and forest fires throughout the country and deal with the U.S. Forest Service regularly. They have thermal imaging systems today. They're better than the human eye because they can detect hot spots before they become visible. They have not only remote cameras, but remote sensor technology that works even better. And it's not that expensive. In the case up in, you know, Monmouth County, I would be asking the Forest Service, what type of cameras did you buy, and who was the person who's put them in the places where they didn't work properly? Because that makes no sense either. I just think you have a recalcitrant agency that's done certain things a certain way for so many years. That's what they want to continue to do. And when we hear that they're the experts, well, I remember years ago they had this idea that in order to protect the Pinelands from forest fires, that we should put a 100-foot grass buffer around every structure in the Pinelands. I don't remember if you remember that. I was around for that one, which meant there would be almost no Pinelands left. So your job as commissioners is to look out for the Pinelands and to protect the forest and protect the trees. You're sort of the Lorax agency. The other reason I wanted to come up and speak a minute is that this marijuana issue is real, and there are studies that are being done by the industry that says that within a few years after it passes, it will be a $2 billion industry. The soils and the climate in South Jersey in and around the Pinelands have some of the best soils and temperature, moisture, and climate for growing a marijuana. So it could become a very big industry, and it's something you better need to start looking at because they use a lot of water, a lot of energy, and give off a lot of pollution. So it is really something you're going to need to look at and to figure out how to regulate in the Pinelands because there will be impacts. I'm not talking about the social impacts and all that other stuff. I'm just talking clearly on the environmental side because a lot of them put in greenhouses that use a tremendous amount of power. A lot of them use tremendous amount of fertilizers and other chemicals and fungicides and grow things either hydroponically or even on the soil because they're trying to boost as much THC as possible. So there really will be big environmental impacts from it. So it's something you really need to have a subcommittee or start looking at. And then my final point is with another hot summer at record summer heat, and the growing season getting longer and the heat getting longer and hot and humid, I know there was some work done a few years ago on climate change in the Pinelands and trying to address those issues and how we move forward with greenhouse gas reduction and dealing with those changes that are going to come because, we may see palm trees instead of pine trees one day. So I was just wondering if that work is still going on because I have not heard anything about it in quite a while. So.
Thank you. Emil DeVito.
Katie is going to go first from EPA and then I'll go.
I have these letters that we submitted to the commissioners, and I think they were distributed by the staff, but I just wanted to make sure everyone got it.
They were distributed to all the commissioners, yes.
So I just want, in case you guys didn't get a chance to take a look at these ones, this is our most recent letter that was sent beginning of this week or early last week. Sorry, for the record, Katie Smith, Pinelands Preservation Alliance. I wanted to talk to the commission about mine expansion application in Woodland Township. The commissioners who were present at the Policy and Implementation Committee meeting a couple of weeks ago have heard about this, and I believe some of the commissioners did ask the staff to provide an update at this meeting, so I would be interested in hearing the status of that. But for those commissioners who weren't there, this is an existing mine in Woodland Township. The applicant owns about 1,400 acres of land in an area that's really prime habitat for particularly threatened snake species, corn snake, pine snake, as well as some threatened bird species, red-headed woodpecker, barred owl. And the applicant had initially come to the commission with a proposal for a 40-acre expansion. The commission rightfully asked the applicant to conduct a threatened and endangered species survey on the entire parcel that they owned. As you all are aware, any mining activity can have a significant impact on the surrounding area, especially the area immediately surrounding that mining area. The applicant was upset about that, and the commission sort of went back and forth. And the last that I was aware, the applicant had proposed a 132-acre expansion, and they were proposing to deed restrict the rest of the property. So the Pinelands Preservation Alliance definitely feels that the applicant needs to survey any area, certainly that it's expanding into mining as incredibly destructive activity and would destroy any habitat that's in that area. So particularly susceptible if there are any hibernacula in the area. The 132 acres that's proposed for the expansion, and it would have a secondary impact on the surrounding area. Additionally, I wanted to bring up some of the restoration standards that are in the comprehensive management plan and that were included in the applicant's initial mining permit that they got back in '81 that said basically that the applicant would have to continuously restore their mining area basically to the fill level that it was. when they began mining. And none of that restoration has occurred, to my knowledge, based on the aerial photos that are available. So that's the first thing. I also wanted to touch on the heritage minerals application. I'm glad to hear that the commission staff is taking a look at that. And just so the commission is aware, the DEP issued a letter to the applicant saying that they had conducted a preliminary review of the application and that it didn't meet their standards for threatened and endangered species, for impervious cover, or for wet borrow pit regulations. So we're particularly concerned about the T&E regulations, that they're not meeting. Some of their surveys are inadequate, and some of their transfer plans and mitigation plans really raise a lot of questions that still need to be answered, as well as the extensive impervious cover that's proposed. And finally, just want to say how happy I was to see the CMP amendments listed as part of the fiscal year 2019 budget and fiscal year 2018 budget. And I sincerely hope that the commission staff will be presenting to the full commission pretty quickly on particularly the Black Run headwaters, PDC changes, and water allocation. Thanks.
Thank you. Emil?
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Emil DeVito, New Jersey Conservation Foundation. When I spoke at the P&I meeting, I was concerned about the Woodmansey Mine application, and I appreciate the commission's efforts to try to come up with an ironclad deed restriction, you know, for whatever solution is arrived at over there. But I just want to emphasize that I don't think a deed restriction will work. As long as the private landowner owns the property, they're going to try to find a way to unravel the deed restriction in the future. I was shocked to hear that with Heritage Minerals, the deed restrictions that were supposed to be part of a settlement how many decades ago were never filed. So, I mean, deed restrictions don't work, period. The property owner owns the land. They're going to try to get around the deed restriction someday, and they're going to get a lot of sympathy from the courts because they're the property owner. So I just want to emphasize that in the preservation zone adjacent to Greenwood and Brendan Burns State Forest, if they even deserve to mine anything based on surveys, and which haven't been done yet, and you know, if land is going to be preserved, it should go to the DEP. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And then I appreciate the efforts with Woodland Township. I was at one of their town meetings a couple of weeks ago, and they're obviously investigating all their options. And I'm glad to hear that they're doing a T&E survey. But I just want to point out that we already know that almost all of the property between the New Lisbon Development Center and the 4 Mile Circle over there, the wooded property that they own, is already known to be T&E habitat. The red-headed woodpecker surveys that I've done over the last 10 years show that almost all of it, except maybe some of the road frontage, is T&E habitat. So, and maybe the surveys will find more T&E species. So I think, you know, somebody mentioned that there's a lot of this highway zone that could be redeveloped all the way along Route 72. I think they should be encouraged to do surveys along all of their property and find out if they actually have some land that's more amenable to development, so that they don't focus on this piece when they should actually be focusing on another piece. So just, you know, we're watching that application very closely. The State Natural Lands Trust wants to purchase that land and add it to that whole array of conserved land around there, connect up Brennan Burns State Forest with the Michael Huber Preserve that's owned by NJCF. And even if a teeny bit of it does get developed at some point, we should make sure that there's a connection so that one could go north to south there. The Batona Trail crosses Highway 72, and a trail could cross Highway 72 over there too. So just want to point all that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, I believe you had a comment. If you want to come on up.
I'm Margaret Meissner Jackson, and I'm the acting chair of the Sierra Club for Ocean County. I have lived here in this area for over 50 years. I'm quite familiar with the Bass River. First they were talking about 80 acres to clear cut. Now they're talking about 16 acres. When you cut trees, you loosen up the soil, and it washes down into the bay. Now you have the project here about Barnegat Bay that you want to watch out there. It has something to do with it. There is a multi-million-dollar business in New Gretna. There are yacht builders. Those yachts, some of them are over $1 million. They cannot get them out when they are finished, out of the bay and into the ocean. These are people from overseas, from all over. Why? Because the bay is not, in that area, is not being dredged. All that loose sand and so on. And this is the type of sand we have here under the Pinelands. It washes down into the bay. The dredge company, they have to be approved by the federal government in Washington. The Army Corps of Engineers get paid out there. That's why nothing is done right now. There are certain areas in the Barnegat Bay that is dying because of all this stuff. But this business is they're starting to lay off people, the right thing. Right now, they have a week of summer vacation, and when they come back, it's very possible they have already cut out all the overtime for the workers, and it is very possible. A few years ago, they had to let the whole staff go because of things. So it is all a connection between the Pinelands and what happens on the shore. We're right there in the middle of it. Not only that, I have also watched it because in the Ocean County Sierra Club is involved in pipelines and Barnegat Bay issues, water issues. I don't know whether you have seen the latest report that came from the DEP about water management, the Water Management Act of 2017. It hadn't been done in 22 years. Our area, the Cohansey, is right now 54 million gallons per day short. There are some areas here now, it's only a matter of time when we will run out of clean drinking water. You turn on your spigot and nothing comes out. There are certain areas, and I don't want to get into details, up in North Jersey, near the Delaware Water Gap, and on the eastern side, and Passaic and Hudson area, where they're going to be running out of water by 2020. That's a year and a half from now. Because nobody looks ahead in the future. This water report hadn't been done, like I said, in 22 years. We don't know what's under there anymore. People keep saying, oh, the Cohansey has 17 trillion gallons of water. Not anymore. We keep building on top of it. Now, I've also talked with the historian for Ocean County about what's going on in the Pinelands. I don't know whether you're aware of it. There is a movement underneath that really want to do away with the Pinelands because they just want to build and build and build. Barnegat, it's about 10 miles from where I live. They want to bring in 20,000 people. Lacey Township, Forked River, and we heard this from Save Barnegat Bay. There are plans to bring in, because Oyster Creek is going to close next another month or so, 30,000 people. And they have to have houses to build. They keep saying, oh, well, we'll do affordable housing. The houses that are going up there, they're not affordable housing. You can see that when you go north from Lacey Township to Toms River. You can see the buildings out there. And it's unbelievable what's going on. But there is a movement on somewhere here that wants to do away with the Pinelands. And you have to be really up on your toes. And it's not just Ocean County, right? So that's all I wanted to say. But what is done here in Bass River has an effect on the Barnegat Bay. And like I said, the Army Corps of Engineers get paid from, they get their money from Congress in Washington, not locally. So there is no way of dredging this out. And here are going to be a lot. Now, I don't know how many people they employ, well over 1,000 people in the Viking. And, their jobs are threatened. So this is something that needs to be talked about. The reason I also say there was somebody that came from Manalapan. He bought up a part of in my township, and it used to be a landing strip for airplanes. They used to come in at nighttime without lights and so on. But anyway, he wanted to build that out and wanted to get a CAFRA ruling for heavy-duty industrial airport. It's right in the line of Warren Grove bombing range. The township wasn't quite sure how to handle this, but the people in our town, they fought it tooth and nail. So now we are having the airplanes coming in and out, but it goes on all day. But it's all a matter of we want to expand into the Pinelands. So you really have to be up on your toes and see the undercurrent, what's going on. And you may not even find out. And if the fire service wanted to be here for the heat, they should have had somebody here today. Yeah, you don't see anybody from them. So we should really look into it. And by the way, the mayor of New Gretna doesn't want this clear cut. She has spoken out against that. So, something to think about. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who was not on our list from the public who would like to make a general comment? Jay, go ahead. We'll bring the mic to you, Jay. Have a seat. Relax.
To change the subject a little bit, I'm Jay Amunyaya from Franklin, the township, in Gloucester County. Just for the record, I have been attending these meetings as a member and a visitor for some time. But 10 to 15 years ago, the record or the procedures were changed to allow members who are not physically present to vote and participate in the meetings by your telephone hookup. I have a news for you. It doesn't work. Candy gave testimony several times today that she couldn't hear what was being said. It is not because people are not using their microphones. It is because the system is deficient. I suggest heartily that you either fix it or stop it. You have people who are not hearing what is going on. They are not participating in the deliberation. They're only on the phone because there's something that they're obligated or choose to vote a yes on. And that's a bad way of doing a business. There are better ways to make the telephone hookup. I mean, I've been on a conference calls that everybody can hear everything, and everything that's being said in this room is going through the public addresses system. There's got to be an electronic way to connect these phone calls to your PA assist. I don't know what it is. I'm a farmer, not an electrical engineer. But the fact is that what you have is not good. It's been not good for over 10 years. I don't know why people are allowed to vote when they're clearly not connected to the discussion. It wouldn't have made any difference at all in anything that was done today. But in the past, it may very well have been a deciding factor in a decision that the commission makes or has made and is not a good way of doing it. I think that you would need to either improve it or stop having people who are not present of voting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jay, I'll actually second that in talking with Commissioner Howe earlier. He informed me that being on the phone, whether you're using the microphone or not, you can't hear what's going on here. So unless you're physically sitting here and they can hear you in that box, it's a struggle. So I agree. We either stop it or fix it. So is there anything else, any other comments from the public before we get to commissioners? All right, once, twice, we'll close general public comment. We do have a matter for closed session, which I'll propose a resolution in a minute, but I don't believe we're going to be taking any formal action. So we'll conduct the rest of our business up here, and then if anybody wants to leave, they obviously can. So any comments from commissioners, Mr. Lloyd, patiently?
First, Jay, thank you. I agree with you. I've participated in meetings on the phone, and it's very, very difficult. And one thing I said to Mark, I don't know if somebody on the phone had the streaming on, is that a better way for them to hear what's going on than trying to do it through this phone? I've never done that, but
It's a very good question. There might be some kind of delay.
No, there's not. I did that when I had to call in, is that I couldn't hear anything that was being said except Sean, because he's chairman here, right in front of the thing. So I'm listening to the web stream and then like trying to talk into my phone when I had something to say. It's like a 2 or 3 second delay.
I figured. Yeah.
So that was a fun experience. But like it sounds perfect over the web, like because it's connected. We can see here it's connected to but then this is not. And so it was very challenging. I could hear Candy Ashman clearly because she was also on the conference call, but no one else. So
Right.
Yeah.
I would think it's the microphone for the receiver on the phone that is the biggest deficiency. And I would think there should be some way that we could directly connect that to the system.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know there are. But
Yeah.
I've participated in meetings where there are people there and there are people on the phone and you can hear everything that is said. I've done a meeting or two over the phone. You can't hear. So there is ways out there. I don't know what they are, how they work, but I know they work because I've done it. So
I know Nancy's going to have our technology office look into it. So we know the challenges we've had in the past with attendance. So offering commissioners every opportunity to be involved, I think, is important. But if they can't participate, in the right way, then we need to fix it. So something else.
one more. Nancy, could you give us an update on we had some testimony about the mining in Woodland Township, and some of the commissioners haven't heard what's going on there.
I guess, Nancy, you gave an update to the P&I committee, which the full commission did not have the benefit. Could you just give us the bird's eye on that? Use your mic if it's not on. Thank you.
We haven't had an application in-house for an expansion of a mine, mining and preservation areas, pre-existing mines and preservation areas in the Pinelands, according to the CMP, are allowed to mine up to what they were given in their original approvals back in 1979, 1980 from some other regulatory agency, I&I, and something.
The labor
and industry. However, they have to meet standard, which means Whereas you might have been able to mine 1,000 acres. If it's T&E, you might not be able to mine any. It's preservation area. It's our, we believe it's all snake habitat and there are snakes there. We've struggled over the years with surveys, and then what we do with the surveys when we get them. And in this particular instance, and in prior instances to this one, we have done habitat conservation plans where we've worked with an applicant and preserved habitat and found areas where either they had surveyed or they hadn't and there were no snakes or it was previously disturbed, so we gave them that. In this instance, we were working with an applicant. They surveyed 40 acres and didn't find any snakes. We were not comfortable with that because we didn't want to be piecemealed, that they would keep coming back for another 20, another 50, another whatever. So we were working on a habitat conservation plan with them. In the past, we had done habitat conservation plans, which included a deed restriction, which Stacy calls an option 1. And that deed restriction says the land is deed restricted. However, if you do a survey in the future and find no snakes or no other T&E, it's lifted. In this instance, we were not doing that. We were doing a deed restriction that was a permanent deed restriction and working with the applicant to identify parts of the parcel that we felt could be mined where we were getting overall better conservation of the entire parcel. It's a private application. It got called up. So we are in discussions with them now trying to resolve the issues. And I apologize, nothing's happened since the P&I meeting. I was like, what is he asking me? It hasn't been that long.
I know several commissioners have reached out to you offering their help or insight, if there was any help or insight that could be offered, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. Specifically, legally, with deed restriction language. So,
yes.
Yes, here we go.
I talked to Nancy and Nancy promised to send me.
I called you and said, if you need help with deed
Yes,
restriction
yes.
language, it'll
Yes.
gladly help, and that's a good thing. So were there any other comments or questions from commissioners?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about loblolly pine over the last couple of meetings, and kind of got interested in that and did a little research on loblolly pine. And I found an article, 1897 in the Forester about loblolly pine. And apparently it reaches its northern limit in Cape May County. So I don't know whether it's considered native or not, but it's one of the many, I guess, one of the many that reach their geological or geographical limit in the Pinelands and helps increase the diversity or helps maintain or establishes the great diversity of plants and animals that live in the Pinelands. So we either have reaching their southern limit or their northern limit in the Pinelands, along with the native species that are here. But I'm kind of interested in finding out whether I probably won't be alive when it happens to see whether the loblolly pine actually advances its geographical limit because of global warming. I wonder if one day in the 10,000 years from now, whether instead of longleaf pine, we'll have loblolly pine in the Pinelands. So, but
Or 10 years from now.
Or 10 years from now. It takes a little bit longer than that for trees to move from place to place, but certainly you could see increased numbers. So, thank you.
Any other comments?
I would just, Rick, you'll have to go in the barn. And there was months-long debate whether loblolly pine should be considered a native species. And the commission voted that it was not a native species. So there are surveys of biological importance predating the one that you mentioned, and we listened to them all. It was fascinating. So somewhere in the barn is Mr. Zampella's presentations to the commission urging us to vote no on loblolly pine. And we probably have to kill it if it moves in. You know?
The loblolly may overrule you.
I will have to kill it,
All these little stories really are the essence of what makes the Pineland such an interesting place. Well worth preserving.
All right, any other comments from commissioners? All right, we do have a matter for closed session. It is a personnel matter. I don't believe we're going to be taking action, just staff is looking for a recommendation from the commission. So we will not be able to adjourn the meeting prior to that, but the public more than welcome to leave. We will not be taking any more business matters up when we come out of closed session. So before that, though, do we have a motion to move into closed session?
Yeah, I'll move to, just make it clear, we're going in for a personnel matter, right?
That's correct, yes.
If I may, Commissioner, there's another matter relating to litigation that I need to advise the commission on that's just come up and relates to the earlier discussion on the fire tower application, and I need to provide advice to the commissioners on that also. So it's related to providing advice relating to litigation.
Will we be taking any action?
No.
Based on that advice? Okay, so there will be no action taken after closed session.
So we should amend the, going into closed session for two reasons, one personnel and second litigation.
Second litigation,
Yeah.
yes. All right, so do we have a motion on retiring into closed session? We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, we will take a 5-minute recess because it's been a long time sitting up here.